There were only 2,000 of these Hello Kitty Sega Dreamcasts made. This was a Japan-only release, and this one's worth about $200-ish if we can get it working. The seller said it was broken, but I don't know what's wrong, so let's plug it in and see what it does. Let's first see if it powers on. We have power. Let's see if it comes up on the TV. So far so good. Let's put a disc in and see if it'll play a disc. We've got a brand new Japanese version of Sonic Adventure. Since this is a Japanese console, it does only take Japanese discs. Okay, it's sort of spinning. That could be a problem. Oh, here we go, it's spinning up. Sort of. Maybe not. So it looks like we have an issue with the disc reader. It's also not coming up on the screen. Let's get this thing taken apart and see if we can figure it out. So this is my very first ever Sega Dreamcast disassembly and repair. In fact, I don't think I've ever even played one of these, so this is gonna be a fun one. So we've got like a telephone jack in there. It's only got 4 pins inside. Interesting. Honestly, I'm not even sure what that's for. I have to do some research on that. Okay, 4 screws out. Is that all we have? Does that loosen anything? Oh yeah. Anything connect? Wow, that's awesome. Look at that. 4 screws and the entire top plate comes off. That is amazing. Check this out. This piece right here goes right over that LED bulb right there, and that light just goes up through this plastic piece, and that's what lights up right here. So cool. This is in really nice condition though. Like, it's got some scratches on the graphics, but on the inside, like, there's no broken pieces. This looks really good for being such an old console. Okay, we will be replacing this battery. But other than that, let's take a look. I'm thinking we may have some issues with some capacitors here. And I don't actually see any problems on the power supply part of it. But let's get this disk drive out and have a look at those ones. From what I've read, those can be an issue. But can that come apart? I don't think that comes out before the power supply. So we need to take the power supply out first, I believe. Now, always be super careful when you're working around power supplies. I never recommend it. All of these capacitors are still charged. So if you touch the wrong spots on this board, you can give yourself a nice shock. So, unless you're experienced or working under someone with experience, just don't mess with it. It's not worth the shock. I've gotten it before and it's not fun. There we go. Power supply is out. Let's try removing these 3 screws and see if that will get the disk drive off. I hope we don't have to replace like the laser or anything, because those, at least as far as I can tell, are pretty difficult to find replacement parts for. But also I don't know the serial number of, or not the serial number, I don't know the part number of that laser. So once I see that, I might be able to find one somewhere if needed. I'm still hoping I don't need it, but wouldn't be surprised if I did need it. Okay, easy enough. So this connector right here connects right there onto the disk drive. 3.3 volts, okay. Before we get to that, let's have a look under this plate at the main board and just see how that looks and see how the capacitors on that look. To do that, I think we're gonna have to remove this little board right here. So let's get that done next. Then we should be able to remove that plate and have a look at the main board. Let's remove this connector. Always got to be super careful with these, especially on old stuff like this. Connectors can get very brittle. All right, and with that piece out, now we can get this shield off and have a look at the board. Okay, that is all loose, it looks like. Here we go. All right, and there's the board. Oh, wow, we've got somebody did some sort of mod on this thing and did not do a good job. That looks not great. Let me get zoomed in here. This soldering is just horrible. I mean, it looks like it's maybe connected, but that is not ideal. All the rest of the chips look okay. We don't see any leaking capacitors, at least so far. I might replace them anyway, but they all look fine so far. So before we get to this, let's have a look at this disk drive. Since that's the main problem, I want to see if we can figure that out. I don't know if this would have anything to do with that, but let's have a look at the drive itself and see if we can figure anything out there. All right, and working from the bottom of the disk drive, we've got, it looks like 3 screws holding this on. So I think we got a screw right down here. And that makes sense, I guess. Yeah, there it is. All right. Hopefully that's the last one. Oh, that one's in there tight. There we go. Wow. This has definitely not been taken apart before. I know that much. All right. Now let's see if this will come off. Yeah, might have another one in here. Yep. Okay. Is that the last one? Yeah, there we go. Let's have a look at this board. How are we connected here? So we're connected underneath here, but it's not really a good way to get that cable disconnected. Maybe we can do it from here. Oh, there we go. Okay, we'll do it from here. So disconnect it right here. There we go. Yeah, that's not ideal. So here's the inside of that disk drive. This all actually looks pretty good in here. I don't know if, I think this, yeah, this has an adjustable laser, so we might be able to adjust that. And obviously we will clean it as well. Okay, now we need to get these 2 cables. Actually, we don't even really need to remove those, I don't think. So let's inspect this board and see what it looks like. I don't think I see any major issues on that side. And these oh, maybe we have something down here. What is this? I'm not sure. I think maybe that's what it's supposed to look like, actually. I've just never seen that on a board. Have to have a look at that under the microscope. This capacitor here looks maybe bulged a little bit, but these don't look like they're leaking. I think maybe the best thing to do is to just replace them anyway. Oh, that one's definitely bulged. Let's see if I can get that on camera. That's gonna be really hard. Yeah, unfortunately can't really see it. But this one's got a bulge, and this one also does a little bit. So I think what we're gonna do is replace these capacitors, and then we'll see what else we need to do to this thing. So there are a number of ways that we could remove all of these capacitors. The way I'm going to use today is I'm just going to bring my iron in and heat up one side while I lift with my tweezers or a pair of pliers or something, and then I'll come in and melt the other side with my iron, and that will free the capacitor. And then I'll just come in and solder it down and then move on to the next one. Another option is to use a pair of hot tweezers, which would melt both of these at the same time. And I do have some of those, but I don't have them plugged into my station, so I'm just gonna do it with my iron. Of course, I have my fume extractor going, so I don't breathe in these nasty fumes. I'm gonna start with these large ones. Come on. Come on. A little bit. That should be good enough for this first one. So the method I'm using for this, you know, it's not necessarily the best method for this. You can see I'm putting my tweezer or my pick underneath and kind of pushing up on it as I go. That's, you know, that's not the best way to do it because you could end up tearing the pad off or something like that. Once you kind of get some experience with stuff like this, then you can kind of do it multiple ways and it's fine. And some of this stuff, you know, I get called out on some of this stuff because it's not the best way to do it, and that's totally fair. I don't always do things the best way, and I maybe should do that more because, you know, I do have sometimes an audience that isn't as used to these types of repairs or, you know, is trying to learn. So that's something that sometimes I should do more, but also at the same time, you know, some of this stuff you just don't have the ideal solution to do these repairs. And I don't want that to keep people from trying to do it. So while it's a valid criticism, it's also something that I sometimes do purposefully just to illustrate the point that sometimes, you know, you can't do it the ideal way, and that's fine. You don't have to. Now, there are some things that obviously it's better to do the ideal way, depending on, you know, how important the job is. So I like to think like worst case scenario, and in this instance, worst case scenario, I rip off some pads or something like that, and while that would be annoying, it would take me a lot longer to fix. It's not the end of the world. It's a pretty simple fix, and it's I'm willing to take that risk of doing it that way. I am sometimes more of a risk taker than is ideal for this type of a channel, you know, when I'm showing other people how to do stuff. But that's just, you know, some people are that way and some people aren't. Okay, so we got 3 down. Actually, I think we're even ready for this one. I did put a little flux on there. So as you can see, I'm just taking my pick and kind of trying to get underneath the plastic as I go here, which isn't really working on some of these. There we go. And I'm not pushing up, you know, really hard or anything. It's just enough to get it to come off the board when it's ready to, when the solder's melted. So there we go. So part of my method too is just that this is a pretty easy and quick way to do it, even though it's not necessarily ideal. A faster way to do it would be with my hot air station. And sometimes I do that. A lot of times I kind of shy away from hot air when it's going to be the smell of melting plastic, even though I do have, you know, my fume extractor here. It sometimes can still not smell great. You can't always get all the fumes, so, and I don't feel like breathing in any fumes of burnt plastic today, so that's part of the reason I'm doing it this way, even though it's not necessarily ideal. Yeah, that one's definitely bulged out, so I'm hoping this is gonna fix this thing. There we go. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Getting close to halfway. All right, looking good. We are cruising. And if you're wondering how I know how these go, other than the fact that I can put them on the same way I took them off, there's a mark on the board. There's a plus right there and a plus right there. So for these capacitors, the black mark goes towards the negative, so the silver side goes towards the plus. So the plus is over here. So I'm going to add the capacitor just like this. Solder one side. And then the other side. Okay, one more to go. A lot of you guys ask how long this stuff takes. And so far, I think I've been working on this part for about 20 minutes or so. It is more difficult when I'm also filming. It takes, I mean, this specific part probably not twice as long, but a lot of the stuff I do, I usually kind of figure it takes about twice as long because I'm constantly checking to make sure things are in focus and stuff like that, so. It's just a lot more difficult. Okay. So now all of the capacitors on the disk drive board have been replaced. Let's get this part back together and let's have a look at that laser and see if we need to adjust it, or I don't even know if we can tell if it needs to be adjusted, but that is an option for trying to get this thing working. Now, one of the things that can cause a disk drive issue is this chip right here. And I do have a replacement, but I want to see if those capacitors were the cause of this issue. So I'm going to put this together just enough to test and see if that was enough to fix it. Now, I am a little worried about this work right here, but if we do anything with this right now, we're not going to know whether the capacitors were the problem or not. So I'm going to continue putting it together, even though we need to check this work out under a microscope. And we'll just set the top on, just like that, and call it good. All right, let's get this thing a test and see if that was enough to fix this disk drive. Okay, do we have power? Yes. Okay, let's put a disk in and see what happens. Doesn't really sound or look any better so far. If anything, I think it's worse. I don't think it's gonna work. Nope. Okay, let's get this thing taken back apart and do some more work on that disk drive. Now, I think the next thing we need to do is have a look at this chip and this soldering, simply because it's further down into the system. So let's get this done so we know that it's good, and then we can get to the disk drive. The disk drive is super easy to get to, so it'll be much quicker to work on that than this part. So I'm going to get under the microscope so we can look at all of this solder work and redo any of it that needs to be redone. And looking at this solder work, it is not pretty. That being said, I think it actually is functional. Just going to check each of these joints real quick, but overall it actually looks decent. I mean, it doesn't look decent, but it does work. Now, I was also looking up mods on this, and this is a region-free mod. So this chip right here supposedly makes this a region-free system. So all that money I spent on getting that Japanese game, I didn't actually need to do that. But there was no way I knew, since I had never been inside the system before. Looks like a MX001701. It's kind of hard to tell. So it is possible this chip is faulty as well. I don't think it is, but I mean, that is a possibility. So now that I've looked at that, as far as I can tell, this is probably, hopefully okay. Let's move on and do some more work on that disk drive. So the next thing I'm going to try and do is try reducing the resistance on the potentiometer to the laser. But first, let's take a reading to see what it is right now. We've got 734 ohms. All right. So what I want to do is turn this clockwise just a little tiny bit. I want to get it down to about 653. I want to get it down to around 650. We're at 579. Let's go back up just a little bit. Just turn it tiny bit. $580. Oh, that didn't even do anything. 669, that is pretty close. So my goal in reducing the resistance on this potentiometer is to just put more power through the laser. Hopefully that will be enough to fix this thing. There's more precise ways of doing this, but this is usually what I do when I need to adjust lasers. And my reading of 650 ohms is just based on what I've read on the internet from what works for other people. Now I can adjust this more as we go. We can try and adjust it down a little more and see if that will get this thing reading discs. I can also replace that chip on the board, but I want to try this first since it's simple and easy. All right, now the good thing about testing this is we don't have to have the top on. We just need to make sure and push back on this lever once we have a disc in there so it thinks that the top is on. So let's see if we get power, and we do. So now we're going to put the disc in and close the door. Okay, this is good news. Let me get this TV turned on and see what we got. Oh yeah, of course, we got to get that battery changed first. Okay, and now we're going to close the lid again. Please wait while disc is being checked. Come on. I feel good about this one. Come on. I don't know if that's a... There we go. That's working. That is amazing. So I don't even know if I had to replace those capacitors. I'm glad I did just because they get old and there was some that were bulged out. But this might have been simply a case of adjusting that potentiometer. Okay, now we've got the Japanese disc in here. Let's try playing an American disc and see if it'll play that one. There we go. All right, let's see if we have it up on the screen. The disc is spinning up. This is good. And here we go. So the region-free mod is even working on this Dreamcast. So this turned out to actually be a pretty easy fix, and we've got a really cool special edition Dreamcast. If you like this type of video and you want to see more Sega Dreamcast content, I'm going to be sending this nasty, dirty Sega Dreamcast over to Robert on the Restorist channel, and he's going to do a deep clean on it. So I'll put that video up on your screen now, so you can go hang out over there and watch this thing get renewed to not totally new, but way better. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have a good one.